Good morning again. Great to have you along. Welcome to the fourth hour of the Greg Belfrage Show, and I really appreciate you guys being here. So let's take a look at what's going on right now. Tim Wall doubled down on allowing COVID patients into nursing homes despite the 80% death statistic. And he said this was not a mistake about his nursing home policy. So, under Tim Walz, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Minnesota experienced, as a number of places did, devastating impact then on those that were because COVID affected generally as older Americans who were hit the hardest by COVID. We had a number of no que at least in my mind, no question about it. COVID hit older Americans, killed a number of older Americans, and so when it came to nursing homes and the way, the approach of COVID going on, so critics have taken aim at a policy that was also practiced in a number of other states during the pandemic to allow patients with COVID into nursing homes after they were discharged from hospitals, so that that policy is no longer available on the Minnesota government website. Isn't that amazing? Already whitewashing you know, Tim Wall's record where it cannot be found. So that is just it's typical of the Democrats, I think, whitewashing it, not being able to find it. That story this morning is new at Fox News. Let's see what else is new this morning. I like sharing stories with you during the fourth hour that I've not shared during the radio show, so that the fourth hour becomes something entirely new and different from the radio show. Also, let me get this ad out of the way here. New York Post is bad when it comes to ads. Um, we've got a US congressman who's blasting the FBI for releasing the body of Thomas Crooks. He was the one who tried to assassinate Donald Trump. Apparently, they released the body for cremation days after Donald Trump's shooting. So let's get into this. This Clay Higgins of Louisiana, he called it disturbing that the agency um, would impede the investigation by releasing the body for cremation days after the shooting was handed over to the family. And so he says, again, this is Louisiana Representative Clay Higgins, my efforts to examine Crook's body caused quite a bit of stir, revealed the disturbing fact. The FBI released the body for cremation 10 days after, he says. This was in a report that he wrote. Um, he said on January 20th, or excuse me, I think July 23rd, he's saying here, on July 23rd, Crooks was gone. Nobody knew this until Monday, August 5th, including the county coroner, law enforcement, sheriff, etc. And he said he called these actions by the FBI an obstruction to any investigative effort. Who's surprised? Are you? I mean, I can't say that I'm surprised by this, not at all. This would just be very much keeping in step. We talked at length this morning about the what's going on in the Secret Service and what we see happening there. So, you think the FBI, what is free of any of that kind of nonsense, what's happening? I don't know that we will ever get to the truth of what happened with that assassination attempt against Donald Trump. And this would just be the latest. So he said he wanted to examine the body to know 100% if the coroner's report and the autopsy were accurate. He said, we will actually never know. Yes, we'll get the reports and the pictures, etc., but we will not ever be able to say with certainty that those reports and pictures are accurate according to my own examination of the body. He also then reveals, other facts, regarding this, but that story I thought was a big one. This is coming from Newsmax this morning. This is new this morning, was not up on the site earlier. Report: Pelosi threatened Biden if he did not quit. So she threatened to go public with her concerns about Joe Biden's candidacy, forcing him to end his reelection bid. Where did that come from? I think this is reporting from the Daily Mail, dailymail.com. So, Biden's withdrawal came after Pelosi sent word that she prepared to go public with her concerns that he could not defeat Trump in November. Pelosi actually called Biden to say she would publish harsh polling figures to support her decision. So she backed it up, in other words, with Joe Biden. Yeah, I'm going to go public and I'm prepared to back it up. And this is reporting now from Newsmax. Pelosi's demand was so forceful that it sparked a come to Jesus moment for the president, who then ordered the drafting of his withdrawal announcement letter. And Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi have not spoken since. Hardly a surprise. Excuse me. So Pelosi now is promoting her new memoir. And she said, I didn't call one person after being asked whether she helped apply pressure on Biden. So, in other words, she did it all by herself, boys and girls. She did it all by herself. She applied the pressure on Joe Biden. She didn't call anybody else. She did it herself. She knew. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. That's the takeaway. Uh, she told the New Yorker magazine last week that she'd been losing sleep over her rift with the president and was praying their friendship could survive. He knows I love him. She said this is what she told CNN. He knows I love him. Oh, oh, wow. I mean, do you believe Nancy Pelosi's is that broken up over this? Seriously? Do you believe that these folks are, is there anything beyond their own power that they really feel that strongly about? I have a really hard time believing this. She is. Oh, she was just distraught. She's just distraught over all of this. Also, this is a story that's interesting me, really interested me. Dennis Quaid is the star of Reagan, and it'll be hitting theaters August 30th. So Reagan is coming out. And Dennis Quaid has been really kind of outspoken recently. And, it's always kind of refreshing, when you hear these folks that are, you know, making movies and part of Hollywood and they're outside of the leftist kind of mentality that George Clooney and a number, Robert De Niro and a number of others, they're just ensconced in that left wing nonsense. So Dennis Quaid telling Joe Rogan that he is all too aware of social media trying to cancel conservative viewpoints. This was the latest episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. And Rogan talked to Dennis Quaid about how Facebook appears to have been censoring content about Reagan, the film. And Quaid said, censorship is happening to us through Facebook, he said. And he said, Facebook is targeting ads and blocking media that is promoting the film, claiming the content is an attempt to sway the election. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. Um, So Quaid then is talking about how unbelievable this is. He said, I mean, the last time I heard, Reagan was on the ballot was 40 years ago. So swaying election, what in the hell are you talking about? I understand. I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, I understand why Dennis Quaid is like, mind is blown. My mind is blown every day. I start going through the news as we were talking about Secret Service this morning. And I heard that from callers. I had a good number of callers. Phones were very busy this morning. So we talked about this, the Secret Service. And again, have you heard that story anywhere outside of alternative shows like mine and others? No, news isn't, Fox News isn't talking about it. Others are not talking about it. So then Dennis Quaid went on to say when an Obama film was made in 2020, that didn't bother anybody. And he said just the act of banning or censoring that material, in other words, ads about Reagan, so on, censoring that material is an attempt to sway an election. So he said he and the film's production team sent a letter to Facebook complaining about the targeting, and Facebook said, "Oh, it was a mistake." That's what they always do when they're called out. "Oh, it was a mistake. We're sorry. We're sorry." Yeah, absolutely unbelievable. A couple of other stories I wanted to share with you here this morning before we call it a week, my friends. This is from the Post Millennial. One of the things when I see stories regarding what's going on in Canada, especially in regard to freedom of speech, I watch it very closely because I think what we see happening going on right now in Canada will be coming, I'm afraid, pretty quickly to the United States. And so there was, you remember the Freedom Convoy? And especially during COVID and the Freedom Convoy and what they were out there and trying to get information out there and bringing attention. And a lot of people in Canada who were involved in this. And so there is a couple, Tamara, I think it's Tamara Litch and Chris Barber. Their defense lawyers gave their closing statements then and again, they're taking a stand arguing for the freedom to protest in Canada. And so the defense counsel began her testimony pointing out that not only did Chris Barber not come to Ottawa to cause gridlock, in other words, he did not come to Ottawa in order to cause gridlock, but that it was, in fact, Ottawa police who created the gridlock. They told Barber and other truckers they could not do a slow roll into Ottawa's downtown. Instead, police ordered the truckers to park on the street, and that's what caused the gridlock. So, in other words, it was the actions of police, not these, the Freedom Convoy. It was the actions of police that caused this. And they're the ones that are being held responsible for it. And so this is pretty interesting. Lawyers saying the Crown is suggesting that my client and Miss Litch are guilty because of everybody else that showed up in Canada. Everybody had the right to show up. Nobody had the right to act in a criminal fashion. Doesn't mean, but because of that my client is guilty because other people decided to commit criminal offenses unless the Crown can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that my client participated. So in other words, You have a large number of people who are being drawn to this event, and these folks who did not participate in the actual law breaking being held responsible simply because they were there and protesting. But you look at that and would say, well, same thing on January 6th, right? You had a lot of people on the Capitol, and do not misunderstand, not making any argument for those who broke the law. But we had a number of people who were there. They just participated, or excuse me, they just attended. They were speaking out. They were there was a lot of angst, as you well know, after the election, a lot of angst when Donald Trump lost. A lot of people who had a lot of different viewpoints who showed up to protest, who did not enter government buildings, did not break the law. You got the same thing going on in Canada. Why are these, in this case, the Freedom Convoy, why are they being singled out? And again, I think that's a story that has really caught my attention. Obviously, what happens in Canada is unfortunate, but especially as it comes to free speech, excuse me, especially when it comes to free speech, that's very, very much unfortunate. But one of the reasons that I watch it closely is I fear this is the next step that our country will take. And you see again, I think as people, the right to protest, the ability to be able to speak out, um, the freedom to, express your point of view and not breaking the law. You're not breaking the law. Again, that's another matter when you got people who are breaking the law, some who do so by design. Martin Luther King Jr. would be a great example, where as he was breaking laws in order to bring attention to laws. That's one thing. But when you see that happen, those people are fully realizing they're breaking the law. They're doing it with the intent to bring it to the public's attention. That's not what these folks were doing. They were just out celebrating freedom and the Freedom Convoy and, talking about, and again, Freedom Convoys really started during COVID, when all of these governments were trying to shut everybody down. And all they wanted to do was to be heard and not break the law. They're law abiding citizens. I'm always concerned when we see law abiding citizens who are being penalized simply for having a differing point of view. That is always alarming to me. Also, there's a story at Breitbart this morning. Federal Trade Commission is cracking down on fake AI generated online reviews. So I think this issue of AI and continues to be a big one. So the FTC wants to combat fake reviews, deceptive marketing practices with the announcement of a new rule targeting bogus online reviews that are designed to trick consumers. And I think a lot of these you can spot. I think for those of you who do shopping, if you do a fair amount of online shopping, are you able to spot these bogus, phony kind of online reviews? To me, they always just jump right out. So it's pretty crazy. Good morning to you guys who are following. It's good to have the crowd here. Steve and David, good morning to you both. Steve said regarding the person who was fired from ESPN. ESPN is owned by Disney Corp. I'm aware of that. I didn't mention it on the air. I think everybody's aware that ESPN is owned by Disney, and Disney is gone woke. Steve, who sarcastically says, "All I hear is you aren't concerned about saving our democracy, Greg. Get with the program." Many people, Steve, have told me to get with the program. So, and David, you're right. David said now there are Canadians who are escaping to the USA. Absolutely. Absolutely. You look at that, Canadians who are saying, but again, I wonder how long before the same thing that caused them to flee Canada will they find in the United States? And I worry the same thing, folks that have fled other states, for instance. And I've got a number of listeners who left California, um, moved to the Midwest, moved to the tri-state area. Um, how long before the same kind of nonsense that drove them out of Canada, or excuse me, drove them out of California, I meant to say, drove them out of California, or the people who had the nonsense that drove them out of Minnesota? Um, so I'm worried about it. I think even again in South Dakota, I'm worried about it. I look at our state legislature sometimes and the kind of things that they do, and really kind of shocking to me the things that I see happen, even in our own state. And it gives me a lot of pause, reason for concern about things I see. And again, and I'll give you an example of some of these amendments. And we talked to a man last Friday, week ago today, that I visited with a man during the show. And forgive me, I'm Craig, I believe was his first name, um, who is encouraging people in South Dakota to vote no on 4 different amendments, and why he is doing that. And we talked with him at length. You can find it in my podcast at KELO.com. Talked to him at length about it. And I loved hearing from him. We just had a great conversation. And I found it really uplifting because he's not a broadcaster. He's just, he's a working guy and really concerned about what he's seeing happening in our state. And I love hearing that coming from somebody on Main Street who is just really, really concerned about this. And it's one of the reasons where's the email? Let's see. I'm going to pull up my email here. So bear, bear with Joe Kirby, Amendment H. Any interest in talking about Amendment H? I'll be voting against Amendment H. I'll just tell you very candidly, no, no, I don't have any interest in helping these folks who are pushing these issues that I don't think are going to be good for our state. What's Amendment H, you ask? That's the one where you do the tiered voting. So the top two, and I got this. They sent out a news release the other day. Democracy works best when all voters get to vote. Now, we're talking about primaries, right? Talking about primaries. Everybody can vote in a primary. But if you're not a Republican, you can't vote in the Republican primary. They want to change that. They want to change that. Closed partisan primary elections don't work in single party states like South Dakota. Boo effing who? Take your crying somewhere else. And it's like, I'm going to respond to Mr. Kirby, and I'll do so politely, but a lot more politely than I am being here. No, I'm not going to allow, and I don't have to. You know, there are rules that when it comes to candidates, broadcasters have to follow. So if I have a candidate for office on the air and their opponent says, hey, I would also like to be on the air, I have to give them equal time. Under, federal rules require broadcasters to do that. When it comes to issues, I'm under no such obligation. So if I have one side of an issue on, do I have to have the other side on? There will be those who say, yeah, well, you should have both sides on. And and I'm just like, you know what? I get so filled with the nonsense and the lies coming from a lot of these groups. I'm not going to put them on the air. I'm not going to put them on the air and have to clench my teeth. And, you know, I could always, and I had thought about this last week because this is the second time that Joe Kirby has emailed me. I've got to respond to him today. Um, and I will politely, and I'll just decline. And one of the reasons I'll decline, first of all, is I know my audience and I know who I'm trying to reach. And the folks that I'm trying to reach, they're not going to be, they were very appreciative to hear about voting no on Amendment H and voting no on a number of these other issues as well, statewide. I don't think they're going to be very receptive to what Joe Kirby's got to say. So no, I'm not going to have him on the air. I could. I just don't. I think those who have seriously, there are those in the media who will be all too happy to give them airtime. I'm just not one of them. I'm just not one of them. And if, I mean, I appreciate your comments. I always do. But I think there are enough people, just as we look and we see people who are out there trying to wreck our country, I think there are people who would wreck our state. If they had the opportunity, they would wreck our state. And this Amendment H would absolutely, again, the only party that has a closed primary are Republicans. Democrats decided they're going to open it up. Anybody who wants to vote in the Democrat primary can vote in. Okay, fine. If that's what Democrats want to do, fine. Republicans, I think, should stand fast. I do not want that top tier, the two-tier voting. Absolutely not. So I'm not going to advocate for it. I'm not going to give a platform to those who are pushing for it. I just won't. And you can say what you want about me. I'll accept your criticism, but I'm just not going to do it. So he has contacted me several times. So I think I'll have to have to have to reply to his email. Oh, Derper, Derper is on. Derper. Oh. I tried to look at some of your comments here. It's just pretty crazy. David said California has a top 2 primary. You can vote for a person regardless of the party. We can get 2 from the same party. And then Steve said, so that eliminates Republicans in many districts, I would suspect. And David said a person can select the weakest candidate from the opposing party. I think the intentions behind a lot of this, they're not well-intentioned about this idea about, oh, we got such, again, I'll go to their closed partisan primary elections don't work in single party states like South Dakota. Well, whose fault is, first of all, whose fault is that? If South Dakota is a single party state and Democrats, we can't get any traction here, so we don't have any voice. Whose problem is that? Whose fault is that? I mean, maybe if you started actually grasping issues that people on Main Street, this is why I'm talking about Main Street folks all the time, common sense, you started attracting those people with ideas that, were attractive to them, then maybe you actually would have a party in this state instead of a joke. One of the problems with the Republican Party is, and I've said this many times, is you've got Democrats in their heart, right? Democrats who know they can't win as Democrats because Republicans own the state. So what do? Well, they become Republicans, but they don't shed those Democrat ideas. They don't shed their liberal point of view. They hold on to that. And that's become a real problem in this state. With you have people who are Republican, literally rhinos, Republican in name only. You know, I think that's an ongoing real problem, and you see it in our state legislature increasingly every year. I'm very, very concerned about that. That Republicans are not loyal to I think I'll put it this way. It means something to me that I'm a Republican. Being a registered Republican, and I am, that means something. Um, but there are those to whom it doesn't. And I think, well, you're not a person of very good character then if you are, well, in order to win election in that state, I've got to become a Republican. I don't have to adopt any Republican ideas. I'll just believe the same old crap that I always have believed. And then I'll try to foist it on a bunch of others. I think that's a real ongoing problem in our state, unfortunately. And that's something that we'll be talking about in more detail. But no, I'm not. I'm not going to be talking to the vote yes on H people in large part because I'm not going to be voting yes on H. And I will not be encouraging anybody I know to vote yes on H. In fact, as I said, it's one of a number of ballot initiatives that I'm going to be kicking to the curb when I go to the polls coming up this November. Thanks so much for being here. Don't forget to hit the like button. It does make a difference. And I know you guys, a small number of you are doing it. What's the trick for actually getting people to hit the like button? And I watch some of these videos and man, they are stopping every 30, seconds to encourage you to hit the like button. I don't want to waste your time, right? I want to get to content. I want to share news and thoughts with you, whether you agree or disagree. Totally your perspective. But I just don't like those videos I watch. Hit the like button, blah, 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 and then then they go on for another couple of minutes, and then hit the like button. It's like, I think that's counterproductive. So at the end of the video, I always say, please hit the like button, and I hope you will. If you've watched the video and you like what I'm doing, please take the time to hit that like button. We're going to leave it there for now. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Please Kamala Harris is unveiling her her price controls. I guess it's what it amounts to, price control. She'll be unveiling that later today. We'll likely wind up talking about that on Monday, and I hope to see you then. So please have a wonderful weekend. So long until Monday, and may God bless.